Now, the special prosecutor, he's special. Unfortunately, he's unable to do things in a special way because he's being frustrated. He wants to prosecute corruption in a special way. But he's being frustrated by whom? By the people that are supposed to help him to do his work. How is that? So, Prof, you must have read, Dr. Akwete, you must have read the epistle that Martin Amidu brought out. People have already criticized the office for some inertia. Okay, so by November or December 2017, we had the law ready. Then in January, February, we had him appointed. By April, by May, he was sworn in. By April, his deputy was also provided for. And then sometime later, was it in June or so? No, a little much later, he got his board on. And then later, he got the legislative instrument ready. Unfortunately, he's facing hurdles. And all he can do now is complain. When you read what he has written, does it seem like a lost cause?
No, not at all. I think he's bringing us down, immersing our feet in the reality of a system that has become so dysfunctional that you might think that it sustains wrongdoing rather than even correcting the wrongs. As I read his article, first of all, it seemed to me that those of us who assumed that within 2 years of setting them up, maybe because of also the propaganda behind it, you know, special prosecutor would deal with corruption, and there was this assumption that cases have been lined up, more exceedingly professionally investigated, cases prepared, he comes, he starts prosecution and so on. He gets in and we saw how long it took, even office and money. Now he has money. Now the other issue is the very public servants who must uphold the rule of law and must work with him to defend the interests of the state and the public are not doing it. This is not the first time he's complained, but you can just also link what is happening with the case we just, you know, we've just discussed, you know, the Afoko case and Lands Commission, police, registrar, and so on and so forth. So what strikes you then is that we do have a situation where there is some disconnect or some disorganization, a very serious one, within the public service and the purposes of the public service and the goals that we want to achieve. In this case, one of the things he said that was interesting, which I also found in the Afoko case, he says he wrote, but they didn't respond. And yet the mark of an efficient public service is communication. The letter comes, is acknowledged in the brevity it has, they give you time or date and so on. That's how I've experienced it in other countries that I'd lived. But here, you know, it is true. You can't get responses to your letters from the public service. I've had so many other experiences and so on. And sometimes you even have to talk to the political head and he or she would ask you to bring the letter. So there is a certain dysfunction. So the assumption that these institutions are all primed to support a special prosecutor to immediately get the facts and so on is not true. And it's across. We've heard it, we saw it in the police. The register wrote, they didn't respond, or they didn't accept a letter or whatever, went by DHL. This is the system we're living with. And in that case, you would see that it is a problem. Two, one of the things he also raised, which I've heard from many prosecutors, whether they are police or attorney general, is that the quality of the docket, the case docket before you, when you look at it, you know that you are either walking in to failure or you must reinvestigate, do the thorough investigation. I've talked to many lawyers and they come to that conclusion that, look, the police's work, when I talk to the police and asked, they would also tell you that, look, sometimes the problem is with the AG's department and so on and so forth. So we have put the Special Prosecutor's Office on a system that in many ways is dysfunctional, doesn't operate, its standard operating procedures are not adhered to, and has massive impunity. So when you put it all together, what it leads you to is that you ask your question, you have to ask this question. Is the public service, when you say state capture, has it been captured? And I recall that the judgment death cases, Woyome, for instance, when the case came out, we got to know that in the Attorney General's office, the Ministry of Justice, in the Ministry of Finance and so on, there were issues. Some civil servants have done things or have not done things, and that was creating certain gaps in whatever was going on. So it brings to question the fact that we do not have a fit-for-purpose public service in place. It has declined. I don't think this is how they've been every time. I think so much is spoken about so much highly. In the 60s, in the 70s, even in the 80s, they will tell you the kind of public service we have. But this is the one that if the public service cannot aid the fight against corruption and political officers and so on will not comply, even when a special prosecutor has written, then it is a very, very serious matter that must be addressed. That is where I connected to your opening statement, your take, that you know, citizen vigilante Mr. Martin Amidu said civil society and so on and so forth. The state is the state. To engage it, you must understand it and have ways of engaging that you feel will yield some results and so on and so forth. So in this case, what I saw is that we must come to terms with the fact that the public service probably is systems, is professionalism, is efficiency, the mechanisms that keeps it in line as a meritocracy, sanctions, failure to perform duties. The sanction system, the compliance system has collapsed and nobody is in charge. That is what you get to. But why can't we then, in the spirit of fighting corruption and mobilizing the public that says, this is destroying our country, let's fight it. Why can't we know the names? And why wouldn't he go to court if he says the law gives him powers to go to the High Court or to tell who? He says the president has talked to people.
Section 29 of the law that he's working with gives him the power to go to court to compel them to produce the things he wants.
So I think that instead of saying citizens, he must go that process. He's explained to us. And I think he must go to the next step of this law that has laid a procedure.
Wouldn't he be spending all his time going to court asking for people to be compelled?
Probably it's important that this happens for the system to work. Obviously, if you sit and you look at what is happening, the state, in terms of its administrative machinery, has been captured. You see, it's backfiring. It is doing the opposite of what it should do. And you ask yourself, how is this happening and how are we correcting it? So we must support him in that course. We must support him, but also as civil society, what we often do, and if you take GII and the Anti-Corruption Coalition and so on, transparency is the thing. Why can you not name those who are not collaborating? You know, let's have their names and so on, because you cannot write a letter since 2018, he says. As soon as he came to the office, there's been no acknowledgement. He hasn't told us his own follow-ups and so on and so forth. But people are being paid simply to be efficient administratively, to enable the law, the rule of law to be enforced. So I have listened to, but I think he's raised a very serious question. He cannot fight it single-handedly. I think we must get involved, but ours is to have more information to know which individuals are subverting and so on. And he hasn't done that. So long as he fails doing that, then it gives the impression that, you know, is it a collusion? Is it condoning? And so on. I think that the actions that we need to do is that the sanction system in the public service, that which makes you know that if you offend, predictably, you'll be sanctioned and dealt with, is broken. we need to get that fixed. But civil, I expect that anti-corruption coalition, GI and others should also now bring the transparency aspect.
Okay.
This is a public fight. This is a public cause.
Okay.
Let's know what we can do.
Thank you very much. Now, Koko, there are those who are saying, like, you know, Dr. Kwete just said, his own law,
Use
section
one,
29.
Prof, it's fine.
Thank you.
Dog, it's fine.
His own law, section 29, I think subsection 3 thereabout, says that if he's seeking information and somebody is not giving it, or they are setting a right of some sort, or they are claiming that they will not disclose because of a certain law, he has a right to take them to court, to the High Court, to compel the production of that particular document. But the question I ask, you know, Dr. Kwete again is, if this is what he's supposed to be doing, what time will he get to do his work?
No, I'm not sure he will be spending 24 hours a day in the courts. There's still time for that. Look, I was reading his piece, and that's where I've marked it. It answers it, and I would want to read it.
Okay.
He says the Office of the Special Prosecutor empowers the office to enforce the production of information and documents in the courts against any public institution that fails or refuses to honor the lawful request of the office. This office can also go to the High Court to compel heads of institutions to obey the laws that support the fight against corruption. The consequence will be that in accordance with the civil procedural rules, this office will have to sue the Attorney General as the representative of the state. I think nominal. Those who know the history and character of the Special Prosecutor know that he's ready, able, and willing to go this route, should that be the only option left for the office to effectively execute the anti-corruption mandate entrusted to him by the people of Ghana, who supported his appointment. But let everyone remember that when that day arrives, there will be no bipartisan praise for the government. It will be a partisan political power play. Those who think this is talking too much or complaining too much should remember that a stitch in time saves 9. We should operationalize this. Okay? And interestingly, we are told that he's got full support from the president so far, the Minister of Finance, the Chief of Staff, the Auditor General, the Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice, and the Financial Intelligence Center have been very supportive of this office thus far. So at least there's a certain support base
within the
which
state
can empower and enable him to effect these 2 paragraphs I read. Look, Occupy Ghana is a classic example, not the only, but a classic example relative to the surcharge and the disallowance thing. And that is something that we should all encourage. So, yes, the Office of the Special Prosecutor is empowered by law to take this route, and most of us will be behind him. It doesn't matter who.
There are those who say he didn't, you know, properly estimate the job he was coming to do. You are coming to fight corruption, and you thought that you would come and people would just hand you information.
See, a classic example, for instance, he had a running battle with the Attorney General over a particular docket that he was looking for. You know, I think it was to do tracing the police docket on consent to assign UO Group shares and other investment interests in the West Cape 3 Point Petroleum Agreement and Jubilee. This is to do with a certain alleged 13 or 14 million pounds sterling that was supposed to have been given to the former president. You know, and I've made it clear that that is a myth. Anyway, it didn't happen. But he had running problems. So you can see exchanges of letters between him and the Attorney General. The point is that they couldn't find the docket. Okay? And you know it's not new. Dockets getting missing in our system is really not a new phenomenon. Yeah, in the courts. It's not a new phenomenon. So this has happened. I don't know about the other instances. Perhaps it'd be useful if we get to know those heads of institutions.
That's it.
And the institutions that are not helping. That itself will have a certain pressure too.
Exactly.
This is one of the bases where he says there are other entities that seem to be competing with his special mandate. He's supposed to deal with corruption. So do you seem to hear him say that everybody should stay off corruption issues?
Not exactly. I don't think he had exclusive. There are still other institutions that can do that. But if we should go back to the law. But you see, there is another case, and there I happen to be sympathetic. I'm inclined to believe that that duplication was needless. The Galamsey Part 1, the Charles Bisu case, Tiger Eye has actually petitioned him He's even started the processes. He's invited them. They've gone and made some testimony. Charles Visitor has been invited. But then you have a situation where the CID is also run in a para because they've been invited by the Interministerial Committee. I have a difficulty with that.
Yeah.
I thought the CID should not intrude, even if it was upon invitation by the Ministerial Committee. So it isn't as if everything he's saying is out of the way. I think he's got some point, but he should deliver by going to court, empowered by his act, and let's see what happens. It will help him and the institution.
We just learned. Yoko has done over how many 2,000 cases,
and they've not,
and they've done some very good cases and retrieved and recovered a lot of money and property for the state. The Attorney General's Department, they have been doing this job. The BNI, they've all been doing this job. Why does he want a special dispensation? Or is it the case that he wants everything to be easier for him?
This is a special office.
These other institutions have the same challenges, but they are delivering. So what's the point?
But you don't have that time pressure he has on those other institutions.
No.
Look at Yoko and before SFO, how long they take to make cases, and or to investigate, and sometimes we had nothing, and that became the issue. And then it's part of its ineffectiveness was the reason why they also transform it into something. But the relationship with the Attorney General is still there. He also has a relationship with the Attorney General. And so the question, and then the police
he's the Attorney General's nominee.
And the police also have a problem with the Attorney General, the minister. So probably we should focus also on the Ministry of Justice.
So why is he looking for some comfort zone to work and fight corruption?
No. You see, he's put this in the public domain. If he stops there, then it will be unfair to the citizenry. But if he pursues this line, which he is clearly aware of, it is only a matter of aggregating critical support behind him. That's the way I see it.
Okay.
He needs our support. He needs the support of the civil society.
And Mr. Bocci, he seems to suggest that even the elite are just going to frustrate him. And he uses that one example of the Mama Yariga case. That he takes up one case against only one MP, and the entire parliament comes breathing on him, down on him. They actually write to the court. Unfortunately, they meet a judge who doesn't take these things lightly. So he's saying this is a clear signal that they are going to fight him in this cause.
But first of all, we need to put this in context. Ours has been a case of a history of impunity. We have enjoyed impunity in Ghana. Now, anybody who enjoys impunity will fight back when accountability comes calling. So I agree with the others who say the expectation that things are going to be easy, I'm not sure how it came about. We have lived in a country where there's been scandals upon scandals upon scandals. We become scandal happy. And, there's often not much accountability. And so there will be a reaction. So these reactions are natural. It is natural and inevitable that every investigation he undertakes, especially in the first few years of its formation, will be met with some resistance. So I'm not sure why the problem, why he's frustrated the way he is. I expected that he should. He says
even when statements have been taken from people, they have been cautioned or sort of indicted, the institutions, the public institution where they work, he expects them to, as it were, interdict them. They don't interdict anybody.
No, we have, as I indicated, we've had a history of impunity. People are simply reacting naturally. Naturally in the sense that we're not used to accountability.
So it's become a culture.
Now, there's exactly, culture of impunity. There's a second reason for this. It's important for us to also know that the sophistication of the target group is not like the sophistication of the general populace of the criminal, put it that way. The average criminal defendant in Ghana is not represented by a lawyer. The average person who is charged by this office will be represented by a lawyer. Not just represented by a lawyer, some will be represented by teams of lawyers. That means, if you balance that together with the obligation to establish the case beyond reasonable doubt, that means that he has a mountain to climb. The complexity of criminal investigations regarding corruption makes the case even worse. i.e., you will need a team of experts to put together a winnable case for you. Auditors, forensics, accountants, and all kinds of allied experts who understand these things. If you have lawyers on the other side who will be looking for only reasonable doubt. That's what they're looking for. The lawyers in criminal cases often don't have as much a difficult task as the prosecution. So if you balance that with the sophistication of the accused persons, the expertise they can gather because of the wealth they have, vis-a-vis the difficulty of the prosecution, institutions that are not cooperating, that are not talking to you, some who are actually downrightly seeking to even undermine you, then definitely the OSP has a big challenge on his hands. I think the frustration shouldn't get to him yet. I suspect the difficulty with the public, and speaking from the standpoint of as a member of the public, the difficulty may be the question also of feedback, i.e. the public being kept abreast with developments within the office, because his is a public office. And so it may be useful for the public. He can probably go beyond the statutory publication. You know, he has I think once or twice a year, he's supposed to publish something in the papers.
Yes, yes.
Right. Beyond that, I think it's okay for the public to be apprised of developments in terms of investigation, developments in terms of some of these things, like what you said. Maybe not so much in a lamentation mode. I think I get too much sense of, I'm very worried and angry. I think probably so much in the sense of real structural challenges and difficulties, and probably remedial measures that are being put in place. Because let's face it, he has been the #1, if not the only citizen vigilante in terms of the level at which he actually carried this, you know, going to the Supreme Court and all the fantastic work he's done in the public service. He's indisputably the Ghana's #1 citizen vigilante. He, therefore, is not necessarily, he's not supposed to achieve everything he's supposed to achieve during his tenure. He probably may be more interested in laying the foundations, laying the ground rules, putting in place the systems and structures, trying to remove the barricades and barriers of impunity, and demonstrating the fact that, look, there's a semblance of accountability. He may not end up doing it all, but invariably by the time he leaves, he would have left some legacy. Yeah. And so I think that if he gives himself some measured target, because there's pressure, and the public pressure is out there, but the court doesn't deal with the pressure. Okay. The court deals with evidence. And I think knowing him, he's an outstanding lawyer. He has accomplished a lot in his life. He's been a former attorney general. He's been a citizen vigilante. He's seen it all. And therefore, he can do a reasonable projection of which cases are likely to be dismissed if he goes to court unprepared and which ones can succeed. And I think on the basis of that, passion will not be the determining factor here. What will be the determining factor, obviously, will be preparation. And as I indicated,
particularly at the start, the last thing he wants to do is to take a case to court and lose.
Correct.
That will be bad.
He wouldn't want to do that.
So CDD, you know, took time and evaluated the entire process in the 1-year anniversary and suggested to the special prosecutor, I don't know if the same way you are thinking about it, say you should concentrate on laying the foundations. They asked that they should be interested, together with his board, be interested in putting together a 3 to 5 year, you know, as it were,
master plan,
strategic plan as to what they would want to be doing. So are you saying that he should not immediately be interested in, you know, taking people to court over tax matters and all that?
I'm not saying that, and I hope I do not communicate. What I'm saying is, on the balance, probably the focus, the pressure shouldn't get to him. The focus should be in laying the foundation for takeoff. The most important thing for everyone to remember here is corruption-related cases, criminal cases do not die. Therefore, accountability can come any day. So the foundations must be there because he is working against a difficult tide. The evidence, the rules of evidence are against him. The willing participants are against him because there's a lot of opportunism here. We have a parasitic public service who are supposed to cooperate with him, but who themselves may be participants in some of these things happening. He is literally working against the society. Because if our society is generally deemed to be corrupt, and he's against corrupt persons, then he's working against the society, so to speak. He would not have friends. In fact, everybody is potentially his quote-unquote enemy, so to speak. And so he...
And at the moment, he doesn't have the best of staffing, not even a reasonable staffing yet. He has staffing problems. The president must appoint everybody else. He hasn't done that. CDD was saying that he should delegate that power to the board or to the OSP.
You mean the president should delegate that power?
To delegate that power so that they will do all of those appointments as regards staff. Even the place they should be, operate from. We know where they were put, you know, it was very bad. And now we are told that a new place has been found. How to get that place ready and hand it over to him.
Is it not ready?
Yes, at the time of the review, all these were not done.
One of the famous expressions that I used to like in the past is, when water chokes, how do you wash it? Because when everything chokes, you wash with water. When water itself chokes, then you have a problem. The point I'm making to you is we have corporate-oriented policing here. The corporate-oriented policing is, if we are saying our governments over the years have been corrupt, and this office has to be established by government, the very entity or machinery that we have accused of corruption over the years is the same entity that has to establish this. Therefore, by principle, you are essentially saying that you have corporate-oriented policing here. Look, the incentives are problematic. Remember when the Act was initially drafted? I think there was a threshold in terms of how much
the quantum of
money that can form the basis of investigation, among others. He is invariably going to have problems, and the reason he's going to have problems is because we have set ourselves as a country that corruption is rife. If corruption is rife, then it means that he's going to be dealing with so many people who are potential.
Listening to you, I think that the question something that keeps asking is, should he, knowing what he knows and being part of the system, how do you respond, laying the foundation and so on? I think what's important is that the public needs to be educated, okay, because the expectations are high and they are timed. Because the whole agenda of the special prosecutor as a response to those who were asking for fight corruption by separating Attorney General and Minister of Justice, all those things also came with the expectation that the government, the president would deliver. And, he's the anti-corruption guy and so on. And so there is a certain expectation that would be used, even if it's a perception, to assess them. So educating the public on the need that this is the nature of the thing. And
already
so
they are saying he's a failure. Now,
that's premature.
Yes.
It's not. I think it's too
particularly the opposition.
It's too early.
Particularly the opposition. No, wait. Particularly the opposition. So you. Let me hear you, and then we can take a break. Come back to the next issue quickly. Now, you wait. He himself wrote earlier in one of his epistles, and he referred to the Whittaker scenario. I'm talking about the special prosecutor, Trump's acting Attorney General Martin Whittaker, and the point that was made that, he will not get the funds to be able to do the job he had been given, to do. You say that is what is happening, despite the 180 million that he's got.
I think that, we've oversimplified this whole business. And I always want to preface this discussion with this famous extract from a letter J.B. Dankwa himself wrote to Governor Sir Charles Noble Clark on the 8th of December 1952. And this is what he says: "In the name of God, delay no longer, but appoint a commission of inquiry into corruption and bribery, as well as the misuse of public funds that is going on in this country. Information reaching me regarding the Assembly Press, which scheduled to cost £20,000, but has cost the country £84,000. And this is 1952. By 1959, the same J.B. Dankwa now rise to Osajifo and now says, it ought to be clear by now that the practice of ministers, commissioners, into bracket, high, regional, or district, and other political agents of government, taking presents of money, or gold, or kente, or kind from members of the public, including chiefs, is not healthy and does not inspire a decent public life. Fraud and stealing are becoming rampant, even at the post office and police office." So this is a letter J.B. Dankwa now writes to Osajifo on the 4th of November 1959. What this gives you is that we have built a particular culture. That culture is dependent on corruption. Curiously, every administration that has lost power in this country, be it military intervention or not, the critical issue of corruption always comes up. The regrettable position is that you have a situation where this office of special prosecutor was established purely for political opportunism, with a view that, quote, it was being established to target a particular regime. And so a certain political division have this expectation that with the appointment of Martin Amidu, maybe Eduji or Kwejo will become the subject of his investigation and probe and prosecution. And so you have a situation where the director communication of the ruling party now issues a press release and say, look, Mr. Martin Amidu, we expect action from you. What is this action? You must take Eduji to court to silence Eduji.
Speculating.
I'm just saying. So where Eduji is not taken to court, it creates a certain disappointment. And so you have a situation where today Mr. Martin Amidu issues another epistle, having been given significant statutory powers. And I make reference particularly to Section 31 of the Act establishing the office. And it says, quote, the special prosecutor shall apply to the court without notice to the person or entity under investigation to issue a warrant to an authorized officer to enter premises in possession of or under the control to retrieve any document whatsoever. So when Parliament passed this act, it gave Mr. Martin Amidu the very power he laments about, that regardless of whoever the person is, you have this power, even without notice to that person. Go to the court, procure any warrant, search and retrieve. Take those documents until you are done with the trial or whatsoever.
Good point.
Now you have not exercised these powers. You have not demonstrated any evidence that you've been to court. The court has given you a search warrant. You have taken it out, and this particular person impeded or frustrated that process. And mind you, if you frustrate him in the execution of that order, it constitutes an offense.
Right.
You have not done any of this. Now you come out to write epistle, to create the impression as though you have done all these things and there are difficulties. The danger I see is that, first of all, he, Martin Amidu himself, has set himself up for failure. And in order to fail abysmally, he must provide a certain cushion or excuses in anticipation of that failure, regrettably. And so, very well, very well. But you see, the problem, and you see, I have always maintained, proud to this office, the Economic and Organized Crime Unit had effectively the same powers as his. They could do everything that he's doing. In any case, as we speak, there are critical prosecution going on today in our court. The Senate OPS case. The investigation was done by Yoko. They didn't need Martin Amidu to do that. And they are being prosecuted.
But you are drawing attention to
we've
different.
moved
Are
ahead.
you saying
I
that
don't
they are
think
not
beyond
cooperating with him?
No,
That
he's
Yoko-
saying that like the law allows, he has the powers of the police
understand
generally.
that.
So
This is the point
he should
to
go
make.
into action. If they are not
that
doing,
is
go get warrants
Yes.
and deal with them.
Yes.
But no, the point I'm making is that, so this particular behavior is not unique, strikingly unique to the office of the special prosecutor. Because we have all seen that there had been a certain institutional inertia relative to the fight against corruption. But your office was specially done, giving these enhanced powers to permit you to do anything. And in fact, it is this office that even if you're a girlfriend, side chick of a politician, by this act, you are called person associated with a politically exposed person. You can actually be investigated. That is how broad Parliament intended its powers to be. Without exhausting the provisions of due process, you write a epistle. And look, even in his letter, just 1 minute, he created the impression, for instance, that there are heads of institutions that who are supposed to take decisions, interdict A, B, C, D, and have failed to do so. As we speak, Mr. Martin Amidu is prosecuting my clients and other persons,
Now we understand.
including the DCE appointed by His Excellency the President. So if Martin Amidu believes that a person subject to his prosecution should be interdicted, he ought to have directed that complaint to His Excellency the President. Now, in one
Formally.
breath, exactly, in one breath, you create the impression that, oh, His Excellency, blah, blah, blah. And then in another
Maybe
breath,
his complaint is related to his lack of staff.
All right. Okay.
In other words,
to absorb it.
I have to take a break
to
here.
absorb him here, but you've not been fair.
I have to take
You've
a
not
break
been-
here. This is not a question of fairness. I have to take a break here. But, Mr. Abuchi, is it really the case that once somebody is being investigated by the special prosecutor or generally by police
being fair.
and so on, they ought to be
There's
interdicted?
no law.
No.
There's not.
No. It's
So,
not. It's
so what
an
is he talking
And
administrative-
the
about? then?
presumption
It's an
of
administrative-
innocence.
it's an
The
administrative-
presumption of innocence.
Sorry.
Listen, there is no law, but it's an administrative practice which is rife in the public service and in many countries actually. Once you are going and you're undergoing investigations of a certain
So you
serious
don't
character,
interfere.
usually they
Must it
interdict.
always?
Demonstrate
No,
the
as I
interference.
said, there's no law,
All right.
so it's discretionary.
Okay.
But
All right. We take a break here. When we return, we will squeeze the little time we have to try and look at the issue of the one architect, 12 projects controversy. We're right back. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile, it's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And thanks very much to Dr. Emmanuel Akwete, Executive Director of the IDEC. He has taken leave of us, and my three guests would help us look at the very final issue that we have to discuss. Just a couple of messages, because there's a lot of commentary about the earlier issues that we dealt with. Just share this with you. This one says that Martin Amidu, who single-handedly used his own funds and time to fight dubious judgment debt paid by the erstwhile Mahama government, why will people think he's not ready to work when the government has made provision for his office to function? And he also is worried, why is everyone not talking about the man whose life was cut short for his family? Also note, lawyers and courts don't always get it right. Oh, really? Okay. Professor H. Prempe shared these quotes with me. I just want to share just one or two of them with you so that you take note of. From Baron de Montesquieu, he said, laws need to have the same meaning for everyone. Laws, they need to have the same meaning for everyone. And that an injustice to one is a threat made to all. Let's watch that.